We are learning more about the woman who died aboard the Carnival Elation, which returned to port here in Jacksonville just yesterday. So the woman fell off her balcony the first night of the 4-day cruise to the Bahamas. Now she landed, this is not who we're talking about, by the way. She landed several decks below. A teen did not actually see her fall, but we interviewed him about what he did to try to help her.
I've had a lot of trouble getting through it because I've never seen anything like that, and it was really scarring. The first night I definitely could not sleep, and the picture of her was there every time I had closed my eyes. It was because her eyes were still open. It felt like she was looking at me. It was really terrifying.
Oh, bless his heart. Can you imagine seeing that on a vacation?
You start me off crying.
I know. I mean, so, of course, what happens when a passenger is injured or dies on board a ship? John, a local attorney, John Phillips is here. Thank you, John, for being here. You hear something like that, and it just gets you in your gut. And, again, these are people who have planned this happy vacation, and for it to end this way, the reality is there are, criminal and even civil liability issues that could be involved in these kinds of acts. Well, what we don't know, kinds of things that happen on board a ship.
Certainly there's going to be multi-jurisdictional law enforcement that looks into this, and that makes it complicated because you're dealing with Bahamian authorities and international water. That's the federal jurisdiction, and the laws here are real complicated. And as we were talking about before we went on, there's only about 3 or 4 courts in the entire country that actually handle these things. Ours is down in South Florida. And so you've got the criminal liability and the civil liability that they've got to look at.
Okay, now we don't know what went on with that case in particular, but we did show a photo that popped up, and we want to explain the purpose of that photo. A little girl, 8-year-old girl, Zion Smith, who actually died falling from one deck to the other last October out of, I believe it was a Carnival cruise ship as well, out of Miami. When you look at that case and this one in particular, what kind of liability issues are there as an attorney who might represent one of those families?
Certainly, and we've done it and do it. They're going to look at a whole possible list of causes. They're first going to look at the railing and make sure there wasn't a failing of the railing. That would be one thing. Second thing, not with this little girl necessarily, but they look at intoxication, both from did the person cause it, or was there some involuntary intoxication or somebody that just got too drunk on board. They look at the security, whether there was an altercation, somebody could be arrested for this if they push somebody overboard. So they're going to look at all of these causes and then try to determine, do you have criminal liability on the ship or the people on the ship, or do you have civil liability, or both? And again, it gets with all the laws of the high seas and all the laws at play. These cases are more complicated than your usual auto crash.
And bottom line, for anybody who's thinking about taking a cruise or going on any kind of vacation, you kind of need to read the fine print, don't you?
You do. We're all too easy to click the box. I've read and understand my rights and obligations, but there's a link there, and you need to read that. Other things we recommend as a traveler myself, just getting back from Boston, by the way, is book these things on a credit card that give you some form of insurance. And if you're going on a real big vacation, consider travel insurance. Make sure your life insurance is in order. Nobody expects these things, but it's bad news.
Yeah, it's worst case scenario kind of stuff.
Thoughts and prayers to this family.
Yeah, I hate to have to think about it. And keep in mind also, should you slip and fall or are injured and you think maybe it's not that big of a deal, there are certain time restrictions and location restrictions, aren't there, in terms of liability issues?
There are. These aren't just your state laws. Like you get into a car wreck or an accident, you've got 4 years. The rules allow lawyers to amend and keep your case going for the most part. Here you've got contractual provisions that limit the time. They want notice within 6 months or a year, that limit the forum. You've got to file it in only certain courts, so there's only certain lawyers that take them. You've got to give them notice. These cases are real complicated, and like the Costa Concordia, all those people that died, 30, 40 people that died in Italy, there was a $71,000 judgment for each, and so there's limits on the amounts that are available too. But we've handled everything from common slip and falls on a cruise ship to deaths, and it's always tragic.
always tragic and important that you just, in life, we just all have to remember we have to protect our family, you know, in cases that there is some terrible tragedy that occurs.
We do.
Because we see so oftentimes people pass, they don't have the money for funeral arrangements or anything else. So you need to just protect yourself.
You need to protect yourself. You know, hopefully, you know, in a death case, it's hard because you're dealing with funeral arrangements and everything else. We see that with all kinds of cases. But if it's if you've survived, you know, getting witnesses like you saw with Mr. Murphy are really important too, because you kind of want to know what happened and start piecing things together.
John Phillips joining us with his insight, important questions to ask. Thank you, John, for being here. Do appreciate it. We'll continue to follow this story, by the way, and have the latest on air and on news4jax.com in regards to the woman who died over the weekend. Her name has not yet been released, but we'll certainly keep you posted.